Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Don Ezra.
You know how sometimes you're asked who are the three people you'd most like to meet? Well, in my case, I've met one of them and I've got to know him a little bit. Yes, you know who I'm talking about. Placido Domingo. No, I don't mean Placido Domingo. I don't actually want to meet him. He's very talented, very famous, but he's not the person. The reason I mention him is that the economics editor of London's Sunday Telegraph newspaper has said, and I quote, Dr. José Piñera is the Placido Domingo of the pension world. Grab, beg, borrow, or steal a ticket to hear him speak. Well, that's the treat we've got in store for you. Dr. Piñera is the architect of the world's first privatized social security system in Chile, while he was Minister of Labor and Social Security from 1978 to 1980. So why do we ask him to be our keynote speaker? Because we want the same thing in the States? No, we are neutral in that debate. Some years ago, George Russell and Mike Phillips identified Social Security reform as potentially a huge change agent as to how Americans think about retirement, how we think about investing, just as the introduction of Social Security itself, way back in the 30s, changed the perceptions of the nation and the actions of a nation. And as a player in the financial field, we want to understand the different possible directions of Social Security reform so we can prepare ourselves in advance for success in every scenario. Well, like it or not, one possible direction is the creation of individual accounts. Dr. Piñera has not only done this successfully 25 years ago, he's been asked for input, he's been asked for advice by scores, literally scores of governments all around the world. The United States under President Clinton, the United States under President Bush, both. The UK under Prime Minister Blair. Russia, where he held a 4-hour meeting with President Putin at his dacha outside Moscow. China, Poland, Sweden, Mexico, you name it, they've asked him for input and advice. We bring you the best. He is the best. One of the ways that I've analyzed Social Security myself is that, depending on its design, it can be made subject to two basic forms of risk. One is market risk. What if markets fall? When we're due to start withdrawing money from individual accounts? That's a risk. And the other is political risk. Given that pay-as-you-go arrangements are by definition greatly underfunded and therefore subject to amendment periodically by the political process, how are so-called promises going to be changed in the future, as is inevitable? Those of us making up this audience today live with market risk. We're familiar with it. We understand it. We cope with it. It doesn't terrify us. For us, political risk is probably much less manageable and much less predictable. But you know, there's another world. I was a delegate at the recent White House Conference on Aging, and most of the delegates there work directly with the elderly and the poor. And what I learned from them is they know nothing about markets. Markets terrify them. They fear losing everything, yes, everything, 100%. They fear losing it all to a force they don't understand and a force they can't control. In contrast, they understand the political process very well. They know how to petition for what they want. They know what gives them mental comfort. For them, individual accounts are very worrisome things to contemplate. My point is, remember, we in this room are not a typical consumer of Social Security. So, because we in the States have never been exposed to individual accounts in Social Security, we've known 70 years of defined benefits. We haven't been exposed to individual accounts, so we bring you in person the person who can explain how it all works better than anybody else, Dr. José Piñera.
Well, thank you very much. That was a very generous introduction, and I feel very honored to be able to speak at the Russell Summit and have all of you as my audience. It is true I come from Chile, a very long and very narrow country at the end of South America. But please, I do not want to tell anybody a lesson. I do believe that globalization also means the exchange of ideas. I do believe that there are universal ideas. I do believe in the power of ideas, and that's why, let me tell you what we did in Chile 25 years ago, and you will be able to decide whether it's useful for your country. I studied economics in the university in Chile that at that time was almost a fully owned subsidiary of Chicago economics. So I had very good free market economics. And I learned how free markets, private enterprise, individual responsibility can create prosperity and democracy. At that time, I remember that during my years there, I was always worried about the problem of poverty. We were, of course, a very poor country. But more than poverty in young age, when even a poor person can work hard and maybe get a better wage if he's a good worker, I was terribly worried about the problem of poverty in old age. A person who is 75, 80, 85 years old, especially if she is a woman who lives much longer than man, do not have the ability to work, the physical, the psychological possibility of earning another income. So they depend completely on Social Security. And I was amazed that after a lifetime of paying in Chile or in other countries 10, 15, 20, 30, in some countries even 35% of their income to some sort of Social Security system, they will end up in old age living in quiet desperation. So I decided to study in depth this problem. Then I went to have my master's and degree in economics at Harvard University, and I spent a lot of my time there precisely thinking about the problem of poverty in old age. And my conclusion was that there was an enormous mistake in the essence of an unfunded, defined benefit, pay-as-you-go Social Security system. I thought that that system that incidentally is not a Chilean or an American idea. You may know that that idea comes from Chancellor von Bismarck in Prussia. That's why I always say nowadays Marx is dead, but Bismarck is still very alive all over the world. Chancellor von Bismarck created the first pay-as-you-go system. Now, he was a very good politician, and therefore, in an age in which the average expectancy of living of a Prussian was 45 years old, he set the retirement age at 65. That is, he promised a great benefit, but with the hope that nobody will receive it. But a great Austrian economist, Friedrich von Hayek, spoke about the law of unintended consequences. Sometimes politicians, leaders do an action and they say we will create this little government program, and they do not know how that program can eventually become a huge problem for the country. So the Bismarckian idea spread around Europe, came to the US, under President Roosevelt, of course, in a very difficult time, the Great Depression, capital markets were not working, so nobody could criticize President Roosevelt for not having begun a different sort of system at that time. And of course it came also to my country. Incidentally, 10 years before the US, we began in 1925. So by 1980, our system was going bankrupt. A defined benefit, especially at a national level, has what I call a fatal flaw. It destroys the link between contributions and benefits. Benefits are defined by different laws than contributions, and the contribution, the payroll tax in America